against unrighteousness, well, at least another person's unrighteousness, is proof that God has made himself known to mankind. This is called the moral argument of proving the existence of God. That the very presence of the concept of fairness, equality, justice, judgment is proof that there has got to be a standard of what is just and what is not. The very fact that man seeks good to be rewarded and bad to be punished is proof that they know that there is God, that there is a God consciousness. The presence of evil and the desire to see evil dealt with is proof that man has a God consciousness, or as the text says, is proof that that which may be known of God is manifest to them. And the second piece of bread, which we'll get to in a few moments, talks about creation. So, the reality of God is apparent even in the most ungodly heart, because God's wrath against unrighteousness and ungodliness is revealed from heaven, from God, and also because God has showed even the most ungodly through creation that indeed He is real, and indeed we are accountable to the real Creator. But before we get to the response of the unrepentant in this, there's a parenthesis here in this text, a pause, given by the Scripture, kind of a peek at where Paul is going at the beginning of verse 18. The end of verse 18. Even though the wrath of God is revealed against the ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, men still seek to worship their own little gods. And it says this is because these men, who the wrath of God is revealed against, men know that God must judge sin. People know that wrong is wrong, that there is a right. There is righteousness of God, and that righteousness of God demands justice. And yet at the same time, it says these same men in verse 18 hold the truth with unrighteousness. Literally, that idea of hold is that they hold it back. They push it down. They stomp on it, move it away, move it to the side. I don't want to recognize it. Why do men and women, children, worship little gods even though God has made himself known? I don't want to. I want to hold it back, suppress it. Because man is totally depraved, even though the presence and wrath of God is apparent within men's hearts, the natural response without God doing a work is to hold back and suppress the truth. In other words, man naturally does not want to recognize the God consciousness that is revealed in himself. Doesn't want to recognize that. It's as if God is crying out through the knowledge of His anger over sin. I am here. You must recognize me. You must honor me. But man closes his ears to those cries and goes upon his way, thinking up ways, philosophies, sciences that provide excuses for not recognizing God. Man holds back, suppresses the truth. God has revealed Himself to mankind. He has made Himself clear. And notice the phrase. Some people still might have a hard time with this, but this is what the text says. Notice this as because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, or to them is the idea there. Not them specifically. Not saying that just, some people know God exists, but it's saying specifically, even those who are under the wrath of God because of the unrighteousness and ungodliness of their lives, even those most depraved, we might say, or the most furthest God deniers, even they, deep inside, know that God exists. They know He is real. They know He's there. By the way, that's why so many of them are so angry. If it's not a big deal, why get so angry over it? It's as some have classified, they call the neo-atheists. They're called angry atheists. Because they're not just seeking to say, you can believe whatever you want to believe. They're wanting to disprove the reality of God. Why? If He's not real, why? It's because deep inside they're suppressing the truth. I don't want to be accountable to this God. I don't want this God in my life. I want to do what I want to do. I want to pursue the hedonism of this life. Don't bother me. Leave me alone. And I just see it around me everywhere I go, and it just bothers me. Hold it back. In a sense, they're crying out, shut up. I don't want this. That's the depravity of man. By the way, I believe all mankind is in that position unless God does a work in the heart and life, unless God draws, unless God changes the heart. And changes the stone-cold hearts and puts a fleshy heart there. This is where man is. They hold back the truth. So the first proof that God has made himself known is the very fact that the wrath of God is revealed against ungodliness and unrighteousness. The very fact that there is judgment in this world and will be a judgment, and mankind recognizes that, all mankind recognizes the wrath and righteousness, is proof that there is a God and there is a God consciousness. Not just that there is a God, but man knows there is a God. But the second is found in then verse 19. It says, "For God hath showed it to them." God has revealed it. God has declared it. He has manifested it to them. And verse 20 says how he has manifested it to them. God has showed it. It's the action, the manner in which he has done that is found in verse 20. God has revealed himself to mankind through creation. God has revealed himself to mankind through creation. Here then is the explanation of how God has shown himself. It is through creation. Verse 20 reminds us something very amazing. It reminds us that the visible creation that we live in, the things that are made, are evidence not of chaos and cruelty, but of order and divinity. The visible creation teaches us concerning the invisible nature of God. Isn't that what this text says? For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly understood, are clearly seen, being understood, perceived by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead. The invisible things are clearly seen. How can you see the invisible things? The invisible things are clearly seen by the things that are made, by the visible. We can see the invisible. We see the invisible by seeing the visible. What in the world are you talking about? We see the invisible nature of God, the things we cannot see about God, by looking at the creation. Let's look at it, examine it a little further. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth, John says. God does not have, need, or desire a body. For the flesh is weak. God doesn't have any weakness in him. But the invisible things of God are clearly seen by the visible, by the fleshly. Let me pause just for a moment. Personal testimony here. Friends, this is one chief reason why my family and I love to hike, to be in the mountains, and when possible, vacation in nature. We will see in the days ahead in Romans that sadly men take God's gift of creation and pervert it and worship it instead of God. But I just want to let you know, I enjoy the towers of Zion National Park, and I'll take those any day over the skyscrapers of New York. God's a much better architect than any man could ever be. Now, I'm not saying that you must be a nature lover. If you're a nature lover, it means you're more spiritual or God. That's not what I'm saying. Don't misunderstand me. But I do believe that in our culture we could stand for a little less rush, a little less business, a little less work of men's hands, and spend more time seeing the invisible things of God through the visible creation he has given us. We could spend a little more time doing that. You may not like to hike as I do. Hey, that's fine. But I encourage you, this is just a word from my heart to yours, this summer, turn the TV off and go for a short walk under the trees and consider the invisible things of God by seeing the visible. Now, how does that happen? Well, it says in two ways the invisible things of God are seen through the visible. It says, namely, his eternal power and Godhead. Those are the invisible things. You cannot see the eternal power of God. You cannot see the God order. That's another idea of divinity, his divine nature. You cannot see that, but this text is saying we can see that, we can perceive that, we can fathom it by seeing the visible things. Creation testifies of God's eternal power. Think of it this way, friends. God spoke, and this world came to be. God breathed, and man became a living soul. God desired, and there was. The world that we live in is not eternal. It had a beginning, as we do as well. But the one who created the temporal is eternally all-powerful. Mankind cannot look at the visible creation and not admit, even if not audibly, cannot admit that there is great power within this world. Eternal power in this world. In fact, I believe that individuals who study a lot make a mistake and they say that our universe is infinite. By the way, the universe is not infinite. It's infinite to our perspective. God is the only one